Commodore fans, are you ready? It's time for another episode of the Vandy247 podcast on the 440 Sports Network. Keep it locked right here for the best Vanderbilt coverage. Whether it's Clark Lee on the gridiron, Mark Byington and Shea Ralph on the hardwood, or Tim Corbin on the diamond, the Vandy247 crew has you covered. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Also, like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's free and easy to do. Follow the crew on Twitter, Apple Podcast, and Spotify for podcast episodes. Lastly, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. And now, pull up a chair. It's time for another episode of the Vandy247 podcast.
Welcome in. All right, I think we're good. Welcome into Vandy247 Live. A little bit of a delay there on my end, but nonetheless, we are here and we're talking Vanderbilt baseball on a beautiful, maybe not beautiful day, but better than the weather we've had here in Nashville the last 2 to 3 weeks. But I'm trying to figure out this YouTube stuff. Excuse me, guys. All right, I think we're good now. Anyway, we're here along with Luke Wyatt, Robbie Weinstein, and myself, Billy Derrick. We're previewing the Nashville Regional for this weekend. Got a big weekend slated. Vanderbilt gets the #1 overall national seed after winning the SEC tournament championship for the 5th time in program history. They've got 2-seed Louisville, 3-seed ETSU, and 4-seed Wright State in the regional. So we will preview that regional coming up this weekend and talk about Vanderbilt's Omaha chances. But gentlemen, how we doing? Appreciate y'all taking the time.
Great.
Yeah, I'm doing well, Billy. I just got back from vacation, and all of a sudden, to be honest, I didn't expect to come back and Vandy's the #1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. So this feels like 4 or 5 years ago. With the they're back to having a really good chance to go to Omaha. And I think that's what the fans all want every year.
Yeah, we're going to get into it all today. We'll talk a little bit about that SEC title. We've got some mailbag questions as well, and I do think they all revolve around baseball. So, but guys, I want to start. Luke, I'll start with you. Just the SEC tournament run, 5th SEC title in program history. They won their final 14 of their last 18 games, SEC games, which is pretty impressive. Obviously, they get the #1 overall seed. That was a little bit of a surprise to me. I think, Luke, I don't know that there's been a run like this in the SEC to secure the #1 overall seed, whereas just a month ago, this Vanderbilt team was not hosting a regional, or at least maybe on the border, on the bubble of hosting regional. All of a sudden, they're the #1 overall seed, and it's because the bats got going, and that's the direct correlation.
Well, I think you have to go back to the Oklahoma series where they looked so poor first 2 games, and you're thinking, gosh, we just want to keep the 19-year streak alive by going to the NCAA tournament. But they had that, and some of these things you get overblown, but they had that team meeting, players-only meeting before they played Oklahoma on that Sunday, and they went out and played free and easy and won the game 13-0, run ruled Oklahoma. And from that point forward, I felt that's where things started clicking. They relaxed more. I think kids nowadays, and not to sound like an old fogey here, but nowadays I think sometimes they need a little more motivation than I did when I played. I didn't need the kick in the pants to get me to play. I enjoyed sports, so I played it hard every time I played. But I think that with Vastine and Austin and some of the leaders on the team, got the kids together and really said, hey, look, guys, if we want to make a deep run in this thing and do what we're capable of, we got to really buckle down and do what the coaches are saying. And I think that's what got it started.
Robbie, you mentioned how surprised you were. I think we are all still surprised they got the #1 seed, right after you get back from, vacation, you graduated, and boom, Vandy's the 1 seed. Did you see any of this coming? I mean, because my ceiling was, okay, yeah, maybe they could host a regional, be a national seed. In no world did I think they could be the #1 overall seed.
Yeah, no, I really didn't see it coming, and it's not just because of how they played earlier this season. Like, I went and covered the series against Arkansas for us when people were busy one night, and of course, that series was a disaster, and it just seemed to show how far they had to go to really, get to the point where they're competing to be the number one overall seed. These issues at the plate go back, honestly, in my opinion, all the way back to 2021, even when they made the CWS finals. That year with Rocker and Leiter. It was such a top-heavy team, so reliant on those two guys. And I feel like it slowly built to that, and it just hadn't gotten figured out over the 4+ years since. And so, yeah, I didn't really have any reason to expect that all of a sudden things were going to flip. But Chris Lee has said this a bunch. You got to give Tim Corbin and his staff a lot of credit for adjusting to the times, basically. Obviously, the hitting coach change seems to have had a positive effect down the stretch of this season.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot just listening to local radio over the last 24 to 48 hours. People basically eating crow, right? Like, I think a lot of us didn't think that this was either possible or at least that it wouldn't happen when it happened. And I think it's tough for a legendary, Hall of Fame head coach to really change things up. And that you got to give him a lot of credit for, it seems like the changes are paying dividends so far. Of course, they got to make a run in the postseason, but, getting the number one seed is a big deal.
Yeah, and they're hosting a regional for the 10th time in program history. They're in the NCAA tournament for the 19th straight time, which they do that a couple more times. They break the overall record there. I want to say it's Texas that holds that. I could be mistaken there, but anyway, Vanderbilt is hosting a regional. They're SEC champs, and we've got a regional to preview. And again, we will get to some of your mailbag questions. I do want to mention, guys, the Vandy has 29 quad 1 and 2 wins, most of any team in the country. They're number one in the RPI, number one in the KPI. The metrics are all there for Vanderbilt, but the last month or so really finally put it into perspective on the field. I think for a while the metrics had still been high, but they were sitting at 11-9 in the SEC. And you mentioned the Oklahoma series, Luke. That's where it turned around for this group. But now we're finally seeing it, just with our own eyes. And for a while, it felt like the metrics were holding this team up, and you were kind of sitting there saying, "Well, the metrics are really good, but we're not seeing it on the field with the eye test." But Luke, now it's hard not to look at this Vanderbilt team and say, yeah, they should be the number one overall national seed. And I wouldn't have thought I would said that a month ago, but it's almost undeniable. I mean, you run through the best conference tournament in the country, you probably should deserve it the way they did that.
Right. Like you mentioned, the 14-4 in the last 18 conference games, you win 8 in a row. Baseball's not a sport for streaks like that. You can hit 3 balls at 105 and they all be outs, and then you can hit 3 balls at 65 miles an hour and get 3 hits. That's how the variance is with baseball. And for this team to be as consistent as it has been and win in the 3 or 4 different ways that they've won. They out-homer Tennessee out in Lindsey Nelson Stadium. They hit 6 home runs to Tennessee's 5. And then they beat them in the tournament where you got to hit the ball with the wind blowing in at Hoover. They're hitting line drives and hard ground balls, 13 singles. So they've won in a variety of ways. They had great pitching, struck out. I don't remember how many guys they struck out in Hoover. It was in the 20s, I know. So they've just kind of put it all together and won in many different ways. And that's the part I'm excited about because, if it's just the bats only or just the pitching only, then that can go south in a hurry. But they've put it all together at the best time of the year.
And I think the only question now, Robbie, is they are the number one overall seed. Does the curse continue? Now, you could say the curse was lifted last year, and it was. And so that's not necessarily as big of a talking point. But since the start of the current format in 1999, just 2 number one overall seeds have won it all. Miami in 99, and of course Tennessee last year. Does Tennessee winning it change the sort of how that is talked about this year, Robbie? Because I think it probably does a little bit. Maybe that does help Vanderbilt this year.
Yeah, it probably takes a little bit off their backs, I would say. I was at the selection show party at the Commodore Grill, and I brought up the number one seed, just I brought up the idea of the number one seed to Tim Corbin and whether that matters to them that basically are being recognized as having had the best season in college baseball at this point. And, he said it's nice, it's fine, but at this point, it doesn't actually matter. And I think what we saw is, did they really get a true number one overall seed type of draw? I think that Louisville is toward the bottom of the number 2 seeds, is my understanding, but pretty tough number 3 seed in ETSU. And even Wright State is not really a team that's going to just roll over. Vandy has played them a lot over the years, and they are a totally competent baseball program and all that. And then you could get Southern Miss or Alabama if Vandy is fortunate enough to move on to the Supers. That could be a decently tough matchup. They barely escaped a 3-game series against Alabama at home a few weeks ago, so we know that's going to be a challenge too. I think I would say they don't feel like a true, like, clear-cut best team in the country to me, but I also just don't know. A lot of years there just isn't a team like that, and so I do think, based on how they've been playing down the stretch, I mean, they have been playing like the best team in the country. They're going to have a fair shot for sure. And I think, thinking bigger picture, that's pretty positive for them, because they're almost, I would say they're like a year ahead of schedule. Think of what they're going to come back next year too.
To me, guys, to make a basketball reference or basketball comparison, almost reminds you of how Florida ran through the SEC tournament in basketball this year and stayed hot, obviously won it all. Florida, I think, at overall for the season, probably had a better season, I guess, overall in the scheme of the baseball world, comparing it to Vandy. But that's what it feels like right now. The way Vanderbilt's mashing through people, 8 straight wins, and now you get out of the SEC. You mentioned the tough. It's a tough draw. It's not. And now it's not. I'm not sitting here saying Vanderbilt is in danger of losing in the regional, but if they're not careful, they could definitely lose a game. Any team can lose. This is college baseball. But you talk about the teams in the regional. We know about Louisville, obviously beat Vanderbilt in a midweek a few weeks back. They ended the season 15-15 in the ACC. They actually lost to Pitt in the opening round of the ACC tournament. So could be some motivation there. But there's also going to be motivation on Vanderbilt's side to not let Louisville get them again this year. The Doors have been in 2 regionals, 1 super, and 3 College World Series games with Louisville. So a lot of familiarity there. ETSU, SoCon champs, they've got a couple crazy stats. Their OBPS, their on-base plus slugging percentage, is the best of any team in the tournament. So this ETSU team hits the baseball. They got 116 home runs. That's 4th in the country. They beat Tennessee in a midweek. They've got 4 players with 16 or more home runs. That's a team, obviously, to look out for. I would almost favor ETSU over Louisville in that game. Wright State is the 4 Horizon League champs. Guys, they almost beat Tennessee, 2-3 years ago in that regional. You had the walk-off there from Drew Gilbert. They have 8 players hitting over 300. They don't pitch it as well. Their ERA is about 6.31, their team ERA. Head coach Alex Sogard's been there for 7 years. They've got 12 tournament appearances in program history, so they've been to the tournament. Luke, it's a tough draw. Now, it's not like basketball where, okay, if you get the number 1 overall seed, you should be paired with the worst 16 per se, or the least of the 8-9s. Vanderbilt got Wright State because of the regional bias per se. That North Dakota State is probably the worst 4. They went to Arkansas because they're close at Arkansas. So that's how it works for anybody that doesn't know or is still complaining about it.
Yeah, and again, I get back to the variance in baseball. If you get a pitcher that's hot on the mound and he gives you 7 strong innings, 7 shutout innings on 1, it doesn't matter if he's pitching for Wright State or LSU, you can get beat. Tennessee saw it when they played East Tennessee. East Tennessee hit like 5 home runs against them. I've watched them in 4 or 5 games on ESPN Plus, and I've gone back and now since we've matched up with them. Their pitching actually is underrated. They've got a couple of starters that are really tough, and they'll give you 4 or 5 strong innings. So, listen, any team can win this. I don't think Wright State has the horses to win the region, but we're going to have to work our rear ends off to get to the Super. We really are.
Robbie, does ETSU scare you more than Louisville if you're Vanderbilt? Because like Luke said, they can pitch it too. I forgot to mention how they pitch it. They got a 4.44 team ERA, which at that level really is not bad at all. To me, ETSU would scare me more.
Yeah, I think so. I think I kind of like them to beat Louisville in that first game. But I will say this is I wonder, I don't know much about ETSU's park, but there's always the question of coming into Hawkins Field, which is less of a hitter-friendly park compared to probably average in college baseball. And all of a sudden you're jumping out of the SoCon and facing one of the best pitching staffs in the entire country. So I wouldn't be, Vandy, if you can look on Twitter and there's all these tweets, these graphics comparing stats for all these teams and ranking them compared to other teams in the tournament. And Vandy ranks toward the bottom and in almost all the major hitting categories, but they're doing it against number 2 strength of schedule in the country, right? So I think Vandy for sure is the strong favorite in this regional. Yeah, if I had to pick a second team, I would probably pick ETSU because we kind of know what Louisville is against good competition. I think they were 16-15 or 15-16. Yeah, 15-16 against ACC opponents. So they're kind of established as just an average Power 4 team for the most part. Whereas ETSU, they were playing weaker competition, but to your point, they've had some good wins and they've got some upside due to how they hit the ball. So they, to me, are scarier probably because they're a little bit less of a known quantity.
Now, this next round, the Super, is where Vanderbilt's seed really does benefit them because you're probably glad to see a 16 seed Southern Miss in a Super if they get out of it. To me, guys, Alabama's the team to watch in that regional, especially considering Vanderbilt and Alabama just went to battle not too long ago in Nashville. Southern Miss, though, they've just had their 9th straight 40-win season. They've got great pitching. They went on the road and beat TCU this season. They beat Ole Miss in a midweek. We got a really good right-handed pitcher in J.B. Middleton, who's 10-1 this season with about a 2 ERA. So Southern Miss, if they come to Nashville, that's a little bit of a step up from maybe your ETSU or your Louisville. But, guys, to me, I would not be surprised at all if Alabama gets out of that regional. And if I'm Vanderbilt, I don't want to see Alabama in that Super. Again, I'm trying to make fans aware of, okay, don't be surprised if Alabama's in that Super. And don't be surprised if Alabama is fired up to come beat Vanderbilt in Nashville because of just what happened. So you get scenarios like that, Luke, where, okay, you might have just seen a team, especially with you've got 13 SEC teams in. That's where the pros and cons of the SEC come in, right? Where, well, you're Vanderbilt, you're the number 1 overall seed. You might get an SEC team in the Super in your park who you just played 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, this happened a few years ago when we played Mississippi State at home. And we lost a great series, but we lost 2-1. And we walk off Alabama, and the way they lost the 7-2 game. There would be a little extra motivation, but at this time of year, everyone's motivated equally, in my opinion, because everybody's got their eye on the prize. So I just think again it'll come down to execution, and Vanderbilt's just got to stay with their identity and keep playing the way they're playing right now, and chips will fall where they may. I would rather play Southern Miss if we get there. I will caution you this: Southern Miss. I've actually gone to a couple of games there about 6 years ago. That's a tough place to play down in Hattiesburg. Their crowd they line the outfield fences. They line the side, kind of like at a high school. You see people leaning on the fence, and they're really intimidating. They're always on the outfielders, distracting them, and they get away with it. So it'll be a tough place. Alabama could win it. You're right, but it's a tough place to play at Southern Miss.
Yeah, and either way, you're hosting the Super if you get out of your regional. I think that's obviously got to be a good feeling for Vanderbilt. Unlike the teams outside the top 8, as a 1 seed, you're not sure. You may not be hosting. Like Ole Miss could be playing Georgia in Athens, and that's a tough way to get to Omaha. Tough series to win. But guys, Robbie, I know you got to get out of here about 10 minutes, so we're going to try to give you a chance to answer some of these mailbag questions with us. I do want to tell you guys about Sutherland and Belk. They sponsor the mailbag and the chat room. If your loved one has been hurt or in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call at 615-846-6200 to learn about your rights and whether they can help. Our guest line with Robbie and Luke, brought to you by John Levin, good friend of the show, Wobble Bond Dickinson. Thanks to student athletes at Vanderbilt for their dedication, effort, and hard work. Guest line also brought to you by Yeaman Packaging Systems, leaders in end-of-line packaging automation. All right, we're going to start it off with C. Perk. He asks, I haven't watched a game from the parking garage in a few years. Do they still allow it? Yes, they do still allow it, and I think that's going to be pretty full this weekend, Robbie.
I actually went and watched a game from the parking garage for the first time in probably like 10 years. This season against Georgia, I want to say it was the opening game of that series. It was the one where Vandy was down for most of the game. I want to say like 3-1 and came back and won late. I went with a friend of mine from school, and we left like in the 8th inning or 7th inning, and we both get home and saw that Vandy actually ended up winning, and we were like, "How did that happen?" It was a ton of fun. I would highly recommend if you haven't done that before. The view was better than I remembered, and you can see the action, and it's kind of fun. There's some other people up there, and you got your own little crew.
Yeah, you can bring your own cooler, drinks. It's all free. You can park up there for free. It's nothing better.
I guess, Robbie, my question is, I've never been up there to watch a game. What can you not see from up there? What angle gets cut off?
So it's high enough up that you can see. I think it would be maybe the right field corner would be the most difficult area to see, but I think it's at such an angle that because it's like 10 floors up or 12 floors up that I think you can see pretty much everything. It's more like you can't tell whether a pitch is a ball or a strike unless it's in the dirt. You're not going to be able to really tell that. But I mean, it's actually, I was quite surprised. You can still see the ball moving around and all that. And it was pretty fun. It was a little bit like what I imagine would be the Wrigley Field sitting the apartment high rises outside the stadium type of feel.
Well, that's probably, I mean, if you're sitting in the infield, it's hard to tell if a ball's getting out right off the bat, but in the garage, you probably know right away, like
more or less. It's a lot easier to tell. That's the thing is it's a trade-off, right? Like, of course, the better seats are closer to the action. This is pretty far away, but you can hear the PA, like you can hear what's going on for the most part. It was a really fun change-up. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and tickets are not going to be easy to get this weekend. So again, they do allow the parking garage, so that will be available for you to go watch. Vandy Mark, Levi Huseman is beginning to remind me of Adam Ravenel with his wicked slider from the left side. While he may not become the closer as Ravenel did in that first national championship season, do you see some similarities? I do. Obviously, Ravenel is from the right side and was maybe a little bit more of a power guy than Huseman is. But Huseman has been huge, guys. He's induced 3 or 4 huge double plays. Had a huge one there against Ole Miss, and it would just raise his hands up like that's what he does. I mean, that's what he's been doing this year. And the stats, like Ravenel, you look at his numbers. He was 3-2 with a 1.35 ERA in 24 appearances, 40 innings pitched, and 37 strikeouts. Huseman, it might be tough for him to get those numbers by the end of the season because it's some more of it. This might be a deeper pen, Luke, than 2014. Somehow, I mean, that was a really good 2014 pitching staff, but we talk about this staff. Huseman is just one of a number of guys that have been clutch for this team.
Yeah, Levi, I feel really good when Levi comes in to get a lefty out in certain situations. Now, he's not going to be a bridge guy that's going to give you 3 or 4 innings, but Levi can get you out of a jam because he induces ground balls. And he's got nasty stuff. He really does. And his confidence level, he's finally healthy. You know, last year he didn't pitch a lot because of health reasons. And I think, you know, once you get feeling better and you feel stronger and healthier, that makes your stuff that much better. And Levi will help us for sure in this tournament. We're going to have him.
Okay, wonders. What is the issue with Miller Green? He's been really bad since Auburn. Should we expect him to pitch in the tournament, even with runners on? You know, I think they're going to be really careful with him. He'll probably be a spot guy, Robbie, just because of he's struggled. He's not a guy that's going to give you 3 innings and set you up for your closer. He's a guy that's a setup guy for your closer to pitch maybe against 2 to 3 batters from the left side. He has struggled a bit. He was better last year, really, if you look at his numbers. But he's not a guy. Luckily, Robbie, he's not a guy that you have to be at his best. Right, he's got to just be solid in there for maybe 2 to 3 batters in certain spots. I don't know how much he pitches this weekend, and even in a super, I'm not sure how much he pitches. But they'll need him in a big spot, and he'll have to come through. The pressure will be on, but luckily he's a sophomore now, and he's been through some moments like that.
Yeah, Chris has discussed this with subscribers on the Commodore War Room message board, and I think he made a good point that. At some point, maybe what you can do is if you're up 12-2 in a game or something like that, whether that's in regionals or wherever, or maybe even if you're trailing big in a game, try to get him in there and see if you can get some of that confidence back. Are they going to pitch him in a high leverage moment in the postseason? I think that would be pretty risky right now, especially given that they've got a really deep bullpen and they're going to have other options. But I mean, to your point, when you're playing a lot of games that could be in the postseason back-to-back days, and if your starter doesn't go that deep into the game, which Vandy's starters haven't been doing that as much lately, then you may need them in a big spot if you burn a lot of arms. So ideally, they could maybe get them in, like tweak some stuff and get them into a blowout or two, especially early in the postseason, and see if that can help them figure things out and reset a little bit. And if not, then you're going to have to decide whether he really is in the plans for you in big moments, I would say.
A defining moment with Miller to me, guys, is, obviously we go back to the Auburn game that he gave up the grand slam walk-off. That game right there probably punctured his confidence so poorly that he's been trying to recover from that all year. Because he's been put in those situations several times and hasn't come across. It's one of those things where when Brownie calls for an inside pitch, he hits the guy. If he calls for a pitch in the outside corner, he puts it down the middle. He's just he's battling it between the ears right now.
From Matt B, 2192, and then we'll get you out of here, Robbie. As of late, it feels like our starting pitching has not gone deep into games. Yes, J.D. Thompson went 6+ against Georgia, Alabama, and UT. Bowker went 7 in his first series at Auburn, but has been mostly between 3 to 5 innings as of late. Fennell shuts down the lineups 1 to 2 times through and then gives up a solo home run or two. Has been great, but doesn't go long outside of Ole Miss because teams foul him off and run a pitch count. While bullpen pitching may be our biggest strength, is the length of starting pitching one of our biggest weaknesses, and could this bite us in the regional? I think this is a good point. I don't think it's something to be like crazy worried about. Number one, because Vanderbilt has probably the best bullpen in the country. It's probably between them, LSU, or Texas. I would still probably give the edge to Vandy, and a lot of pundits do. So that's why it has it. You haven't seen it become much of an issue because the bullpen has been so good with Hawks, McIlvain, Hughes been who we've talked about. Luke Guth has been really good. But I don't think it bites them in this regional. I think it could bite them in a super potentially, especially if you see Alabama because of Alabama's bats. This is an Alabama team that could have hosted a regional. That they were a win away really from hosting a regional, but maybe not even until Omaha either, guys. Like I just think because of how good their bullpen is, Robbie, they probably don't have to worry about that too much in the regional. Maybe in the super, but like I said, maybe not even until Omaha.
Yeah, I think you got to keep in mind too that there's not that many teams across the country who have more than like one guy who's really going more than 5 or 6 innings consistently, and a lot of teams don't have anyone who's really all that consistent at doing that. So I do agree, like it is to some extent a weakness, and this isn't the same type of power or starting pitching staff that maybe we've become accustomed to Vandy having from over the years, like for instance with Rocker and Leiter most recently during that last CWS run. At the same time, so yeah, I do think it is a weakness, but I also think that the bullpen is going to do a lot of things to cover that up. And also in a regional scenario, Vandy goes 4 deep with 4 quality starting pitchers, even if they're not absolute studs. And there's not a lot of teams who are going to be able to roll out a quality 4th starter, for that game if it comes down to that game 7. So I think that's an advantage. And then what you can hope for supers is if one of the starters is yanked early, then either Austin Nye or potentially Connor Fennell or whoever ends up being, you're only going to start 3 of those 4 guys, right? And so you've got an extra guy in long relief who can help lift you up there.
Yeah, there's always been a guy, if you make it to Omaha, there's always going to be a guy that didn't do much during the year. Like, for instance, go back to the Richie Goodenow era. That hasn't done much the whole year, may have an ERA in 7, but can come in and be and have to fill some meaningful innings. There'll be somebody that we haven't heard of that we us 3 or anybody else hasn't talked about that will step up and get a big out or get through a big inning.
Robbie, I know you got to get going. Thanks for taking the time. I know you'll be there this weekend. We'll see you at the Hawk.
Yeah, I will see you guys this weekend. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir.
All right, that's Robbie Weinstein. Luke, we got a couple more questions here to get to. I want to make sure we get to all these. Let's see here. Here's a funny one. Cousin CJ, in honor of the celebratory Buc-ee's stop that Vandy made, what are y'all's favorite Buc-ee snacks? For me, Luke, I just now started getting this the last couple trips. The turkey sandwich. The smoked turkey sandwich, because I'm usually pulled pork or maybe even brisket, but I switched it up. One of the last times I went, that smoked turkey sandwich is my go-to, and then their chips are really good. Other than that, I don't get many of the like, what are the snacks? The Buc-ee's
Bucky nugget.
but I'm not a big fan of those.
No, that's just like just putting butter in your mouth. Sugar. It's funny. I kind of agree with Corbin. My favorite thing's the bathrooms. They're so clean you could eat off the floor. And then I love the brisket sandwich. I've gotten it a couple times that had a little fat in it that you didn't like, but it's usually a pretty darn good sandwich.
Yeah, they've got good stuff. He's right about those bathrooms too. They're ginormous. There's not typically, every now and then you'll see a line there just because there's so many people there. But it's usually pretty in and out, pretty efficient. So
yeah,
they made the Buc-ee's stop, and that's something, Luke, and Joey actually wrote a good piece on the site about it, about how that kind of personifies the team. It's just a Buc-ee's stop, but I don't think we would have seen that the last few years, whether it's a confidence thing or a swagger thing. Like, right. This team has a little bit of personality to them that maybe we're just now seeing. We haven't really seen all season, but I mean, especially now in Hoover can bring it out of you too.
Yeah, I'd use the word looseness. This is a loose group that when it's time to go to work, they put the hard hat on and go to work, but they also can have a good time while they're doing it.
Okay, another one from Cousin CJ. Should this team being the number one seed change our expectations for the postseason? Most of us would have been happy with a super regional heading into the season, but it feels like it's Omaha or bust now. Yeah, it does. I think this is a season. This is a perfect season, Luke, to look at with the lens of, okay, we thought this team's ceiling was a super regional. At least I did, and maybe you thought differently. Maybe some other people thought differently. But now that you've shown what you can do, this team can win a national title. This team can beat anybody. Is it Omaha or bust? You could say that, but you could also run into a super regional like Mississippi State a few years back, like you talked. I think it was 2018, Luke. That was the season before the season.
That's right.
They won it all in 2019. You could see that where it's just so tight, and you could see Alabama. So who knows? I do think it's this team should get to Omaha because they can, and they can win in Omaha. Whether it's Omaha or bust, you could say that if you want, but I do think, Luke, at least for me, they've changed, because it's hard to sit here and say this team shouldn't make Omaha. I mean, you're the number one overall seed, and then you should have a shot to win it all.
Well, if you look at how we played for the last 10, 12 games, absolutely this team should make Omaha. But I alluded to this earlier, and you know this, Billy. I'm being Captain Obvious a little bit here, but you have to. It's a cautionary tale. You can hit 3 bullets right at people, and then get 3 bloops off the end of the bat that fall in for hits. That's what baseball is. So, and look how quick things can change. That Tennessee team that was so dominant in 22, they don't get out of their super because Notre Dame comes in and beats them. And they were a heavy, heavy favorite to get there. So, will I be disappointed if they don't get there? Absolutely. But my expectations were next year being that team. So I think if we do get there this year, the future looks bright for the next year as well.
From Steve VU98, he says, this team is seated higher than our previous teams that made it to and won the College World Series. Is this team really that good? And how do they compare to the past College World Series winning teams? It's another good question. I do think just the way they're playing right now, but like you said, Luke, the last month, Vandy is undoubtedly the best team in the country. They're the hottest team in the country. They're playing the best. Their defense has been so good. I do think this is, in terms of comparing past College World Series winning teams, and Corbin even said this is the best defense Corbin's had. He's had some really, really good defenses. Obviously, that 2014 defense was really good. So was 2019. But I mean, Luke, this defense has won them games. This defense has saved a lot of runs this season. So I think they've got a better defense than the last two College World Series winning teams. The pitching might be the deepest. It may not be the most talented at the top end, because your top end guy, J.D. Thompson, Bowker, and Fennell are not as good as your Rocker and Leiter. But from top to bottom, you go all the way from Thompson down to, England Bryan. This could be the deepest pitching staff. 2014 was really deep. That's probably close. And then offensively, I think offensively is more of an X factor. The 2019, it's going to be hard to be better than that 2019 offense for any team in college baseball history, for that matter. So offensively is the X factor, though, Luke. What can they do offensively behind, at the plate this postseason to push for Omaha is my question. Can they keep the offensive momentum going? And then I think we'll have our answer of how do they compare to the past College World Series winning teams.
Well, to me, and I hope these kids aren't listening, but to me, the pressure is on Rustin Rigdon and R.J. Austin to table sit. If they table sit for this lineup, you got Riley Nelson right after that, Brody and Holcomb and Colin Barcy. Those guys have really been producing when guys have been on base. Not so much when they're up there with nobody on. So I just feel like those two guys, for the offensive side of things, there's a lot of pressure on them to get on base, either by getting hit, walk, reach by an error, something. They've got to get on. Those two have to get on and get the motor running, because once we get on the pass, and Corbin said this before, it's moving the lineup, keeping it going. And those two are the key to our success offensively. Pitching-wise, you're right. It's just depth. We have to use that depth too. I'm not sure who will be left off because of the roster limit, but you're going to have a pitcher that could help us. It may not even be on the roster for the regionals. Defense has to just keep staying steady the way they've been playing, and that's the formula. Those three things have to happen, and they'll get there.
You're right. Riley Nelson after the game said that when Rustin gets on to start a game, said we're almost always scoring. Yeah. I mean, we're going to score to start that inning. So that's a really good point about Austin and Rigdon. We do have a chat question here from Trace Lawless. How is baseball positioned NIL wise to sustain and build on this year? Luke, I'm going to throw that to you. I know it's different, or it was different. The philosophy was different going into this season than it really has been under Corbin and the entire staff. But it's positioned well in my mind. You may have more details there, but you can tell it was a different feel, at least coming into this season. But how can they build on that is the question.
Well, look, I'll give you an example. Let's look at the kid that went back to Michigan State after we thought we had him. I think Tim and his staff do a great job of, identifying what is this kid worth to this team. And I don't think that Tim is the type of person that says, okay, he's worth $100,000 or $200,000, whatever it may be. I think he gives a package to a kid who's deserving, and then that's it. And if he wants to say, well, no, I need this, they've offered me this, then I think they're bye-bye. I don't think he negotiates with kids. I don't think he ever will, and never will. I mean, he's in the game, don't get me wrong. But I think he has in his mind how valuable someone is to a team. And if he gets outbid, then so be it.
Well, and think about the players they landed and are a big part of the team right now. Riley Nelson is a JUCO kid, right? He probably wasn't looking for a ton of money. So that's a kid, if you're Vanderbilt, you can probably easily get. Not saying there wasn't competition for Riley Nelson, but look at how much he's helped this team this year, and the story. I mean, obviously Joey really documented that well, but also Mike Mancini. I think he's been unheralded a little bit, not talked about as much, and his numbers maybe aren't as good as Nelson's, but I don't be surprised if Mancini's a big part of this team in the postseason. He's got a veteran presence about him. He has helped mold these younger guys and mesh the team together. And then, Cody Bowker too, from Georgetown, a guy those three guys right there Mancini, maybe not as much as Bowker and Nelson, but Mancini had a huge home run in Knoxville. He's active on the base pass. He's hit the ball a little bit better these last couple of weeks. So I think the transfers they got, we're seeing now, Luke, that number one, those are the type of guys they wanted, and they got them. Who knows, what the deal was with Kropf, but it didn't work out. But look where Vandy is, right? They lost Cam Kojal, and there was a lot of hand wringing about that. Well, Vandy's the number 1 overall seed, so I think things worked out pretty well for Vanderbilt and their portal approach that a lot of people said was non-existent.
Absolutely.
So I'm that's a good question of how they're positioned NIL wise. Luke just hit on it there. They're positioned well, and not going to be a ton of negotiating. That's a good point there with his staff. Luke, big weekend coming up. Obviously with Vanderbilt, they got Wright State Friday early start 5:00 at Hawkins Field. ETSU and Louisville will play at 1:00. Vandy, by the way, will be on the SEC network. They'll play the winner of ETSU and Louisville, and then they'll await who wins the Hattiesburg Regional, whether it's Southern Miss or Alabama. Who knows? Maybe Miami. We'll see. But Luke, this is a great time of year, man.
I can't wait to get over there. It'll be fun.
All right, that's Luke Wyatt. That'll do it for us on another episode of the Vandy247 podcast. Stay tuned for all of our coverage this weekend. We'll have every base covered. I think we'll all be there this weekend down at the Hawks. So we'd love to see you guys there as well. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe to our site. Go like this video. Fire away any of your comments and questions on all of our podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again soon with more episodes of the Vandy